A little over a year ago, the Northwest Territories learned that tailings from the Kearl Oil Sands had leaked millions of liters of wastewater. It's one of the biggest leaks in Alberta's history, and the Environment Minister at the time said he only learned about it from the media. That is the subject of a disagreement between the province and the territory about whether Alberta was required to tell the N.W.T about the leak. And it's raising larger questions about how much the agreement actually protects N.W.T residents downstream of the oil sands. Natalie Pressman has been looking into this, and she joins me now with more. So Natalie, tell me about this disagreement.
So this is an agreement between Alberta and the Northwest Territories about water. Since our waterways are linked and Alberta's water flows into the Northwest Territories, both governments signed this Transboundary water agreement that says each party has a responsibility to, work together and communicate about anything in the water that could impact the other jurisdiction. And so if something does enter the waterways that could cause harm, there's a requirement to report it. In this case, of course, we know Alberta did not report this tailings leak to the Northwest Territories, and leaders in the territory say that's a violation of this agreement, but the Minister of Environment in Alberta says it's not. Experts on the subject say it may be a violation, but the language in the agreement is too vague to really be able to tell.
Okay, so what happens if Alberta did in fact violate this agreement?
Well, not much. I spoke with a couple of experts on this who explained that the agreement has no punitive powers. There's no fine or anything like that. So all the parties can really do is go into dispute resolution. And that's what's happened here, even though Alberta says there wasn't a breach. But the provincial and territorial governments told me that part of that dispute resolution is updating the agreement. And so that's still happening now, but both governments said those updates will have more clear language to describe situations when one party is required to notify the other. What I learned is that the point of this agreement really isn't to say, there's a violation, how do we enforce it? The goal more is to be clear about what's happening in our waterways. The thing is, though, that residents who I spoke with say they don't feel like there's much transparency from the Alberta side at all.
Yeah, tell us more about what you've been hearing from residents, Natalie.
Really all across the territory, from the Beaufort Delta to the South Slave, and on the other side of the border in Fort Chipewyan, I heard all around that residents do not feel protected from oil sands pollution. Kyle Taylor lives off the land at his camp just north of Inuvik, and he relies on clean water to drink, garden, and fish from. Here's some of what he had to say about relying on clean water.
I'm very thankful for it, but I'm also not exactly hopeful that future will continue for potential grandkids and generations behind us. A lot of the rules, a lot of the regulations, all that kind of stuff is, to me, I think it's just like optics. So it's just the government's way of saying, hey, whoa, it's nobody's fault if everything goes wrong. We did this agreement.
And so that skepticism is sort of the crux of what I heard across the territory.
Did you hear about anything that would help residents feel more protected?
Well, one thing that kept coming up is that people said they would feel better if they were more involved in ensuring the water is protected. So one resident in Fort Chipewyan compared it to sort of David working alongside Goliath. And that's something that's starting to happen in Fort Smith. John McDonald is the environment manager with the Fort Smith Métis. He says Fort Smith Métis have received a $75,000 grant from the Alberta government to start their own water monitoring program. Here's some of what he said about why that's important.
A lot of people do live off the land and rely on it. So, if we want to keep our culture and heritage living, and we want to let the people know that fish are safe to eat, the wildlife is safe to eat, and the water is safe to drink. And so, we got to take that on our own and not trust a government who's not trustworthy.
He says the fact that government is offering that funding does help rebuild some of that trust, and it shows that there's a willingness to improve relationships. But ultimately, he says it's up to residents to take matters into their own hands.
Okay, thanks for all your work on this, Natalie.
Thanks.